All right. So it looks like we are live and ready to go.
All right, first order is a review of the minutes of 129.
I will move to approve.
Motion, any, we have a second?
Second. I second.
Discussion. Any notes or comments?
Nope.
Look fine to me.
I'll call the vote. Dave?
Yeah, I had one quick one. I just had one quick comment. I thought in the end of it, the statement about getting the legal analysis seemed a little passive. And my recollection was that it looked like that was something committee wanted to do. So I think it's okay as worded, but I just want to confirm that that is something that we will do. So.
Yep, I've
Or
already.
request be done. Yeah.
Yep, I've got a voicemail tag game going with our town attorney, so we'll. That's something I'm already endeavoring on. So if you're comfortable with the language, with the recognition that that's happening.
Thanks a lot, Trey. Thank you for clarifying.
Move to approve?
I'll call the vote. Alan,
Approved.
Rick,
Yes.
sorry, right when you were going for your coffee. Peter,
Approved.
Dave,
Approve.
Marvin.
Approved.
All right, is that all the, yes, that's our voting members, right?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yep. Okay,
Second item is review the comp plan edits.
yep, so
Start with.
we can jump into this and tell me how you want to work through these. Really, you have two separate things, and we do apologize for them coming a little later this week than we normally would like to. And we recognize, people may have gotten through different layers of it. Some may have gotten through all, some may still need some time. And really sort of the intent is this will be, we'll start the discussion this Friday and be sure we're heading in the right direction. And of course we can check boxes if we're comfortable, but sort of like the last round, we may start on it this week and come back to it next week if there's things we aren't able to get to or other direction we need to head. Really what the intent of this round of changes was aimed at was getting at the issue of sort of pace of growth and impacts on budget, as well as the piece on the downs. And so I guess I'll ask which one you guys want to start with, and if you want me to sort of pull them up and share the screen, or how you like to proceed here.
I would like to see you share the screen because I'm so visual. I get to see it while you're working it. So.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many pages, Jay. I think that if you can drive on that, it'll be helpful for everybody.
Great. And do we want to start with the downs piece, or do we want to start with sort of the 26 or 23 different, the pace of growth, municipal budget impact stuff?
I would say start with the downs.
I was going to say pace of growth because that's the burning issue with us right now, but there you go.
All right. Now, I was just going to say the downs feels like it might be a little bit lower hanging fruit, and maybe we can get through it a little faster, but that's fine with me. I'll
I
defer to
actually
you,
agree. I
Jerry.
thought the downs edits probably were a little bit more benign, or we could go through it faster and then have more time for the growth and development stuff.
We have two for downs.
Yeah, let's go with the downs.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
We're rolling.
Got momentum.
I'll remember that vote, guys. But no.
All betting is now final. Betting windows are closed.
That's right. And let me see. Are you seeing this fairly well?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. All right. So there's so Karen, I'll let you
Sure,
introduce.
sure. What we wanted to do is try to profile a little bit more of what the Downs was doing, or where the Downs was, and how it interacts with really the current day and really update what we had in there. So originally we had a 2-paragraph description, in the state of affairs section. So what we did is we've taken those 2 paragraphs out, and we thought we'd just let it be a 1-page graphic. And actually, I think once we give it back to the person who's doing the InDesign for us, she could probably compact it a little bit more. But we wanted to, matter of fact, we thought this is going to be really easy to put together, but there's just so much information. So we tried to get it to really the essence of what the project was and how it relates to the zoning. And so that's what the background is trying to do, is just sort of in quick description, talk about the evolution of the project, tie it back to the zoning ordinance. Originally, we had the purpose of the zoning ordinance in there. We felt like it was just too much. But yes, it's a basic background description. We did want to make sure that the credit enhancement agreement was described and put in there, not with all of its details, but with what the essence of the project was. And then we wanted to give, really a description of what are we talking about? What was the potential development that was discussed? And that, in a nutshell, I hope is what we did. But please give us feedback if there's something we're missing, or if this is too much detail.
And just so everyone knows, I went through and sort of muted everyone just because I was getting a little feedback and I wasn't sure if others were as well. And then just to touch on what Karen was saying, we did have these 2 sort of, really there's sort of 3 paragraphs. What we've done is we'll take these 2 out because this sort of business or themes are captured in the work that Karen did. And but we're thinking that once our InDesign person gets her hands on this, that maybe this can all be combined on one page, because this is really talking about sort of the state of affairs of what we talk about later in the conservation and growth map with our predominant growth areas, the regional activity centers and the commercial activity centers.
And we did do a call out section like this, one, just because sometimes, to break up the document of all the text, but also at first, I think when we were doing it, we were debating about where it should go in the document. So we said, well, let's do it as a call out section, and then we can figure out where it goes. And it did seem to make replacing this section of the state of affairs did seem to be a natural fit for it.
Karen, I liked the document. My only thought was we're a couple of years into actual development of the Downs, or a couple,
Yes.
3 years. And it might be appropriate in the graphics section at the bottom to include some stat on what has been completed or where it is in flow.
Yep, we have those numbers.
So just again, because we're now obviously 2-3 years into the actual construction phase. So, but otherwise, I thought this was a really helpful call out given the importance of the project.
Peter, I'm just going to ask a question on that one. I thought of that as well, but I guess one of the things I think about with the comp plan sort of being, this document that's going to be around for so many years, having a snapshot of this year when someone might be looking at this in 2027. I just sort of wonder, we can do it certainly, but I just want to be sure we sort of what the thoughts are there.
That's part of my thinking, Jay. It's in, if you pull up this document in 2027 and you see that there's, say, 1 million square feet of commercial space, and I'm pulling out numbers. I don't know what the number is. 100,000 feet were developed in 2021, but in 2027 only 250,000 square feet have been developed. You start to wonder, okay, what is the real pace of achieving that 1 million square feet? So I think it is actually helpful if you pull up in the future and watch the trend growth, see what it was like in the first few years. Did the project peter out? Sorry for the pun. But I just think, again, a snapshot now that if it were the first year, I think, Jay, you'd be right. There'd be not a lot of data to get from that number, but we're now 3 years in. So I think it might be helpful in the future.
That's a helpful.
And we could do it.
Yeah.
explanation. Thank you.
I think I agree with that. And I also think, and my comment was going to be sort of along those lines, but maybe a little bit broader, which is that one thing that I like about this and this call out is that it sort of brings the plan to life a little bit, and it sort of shows how dynamic this whole thing is. And it shows that some of the concepts and goals and discussions that were going on during Planapalooza and the early stages of this are already sort of coming to fruition. Not through any, not because of us, but, it was sort of fortuitous that this kind of came together, but it does show that this is sort of an example of something very tangible and very real that's already happening, that started off as more of a concept.
Mhm. So one suggestion I might have on this is that we could do it as like the percent of the, as of right now, the percent of the total development, and leave it at that. So we can say, hey, in 2020, at the end of 2020, they've developed, I don't know, 30% of the housing units. So we can do it in percentages rather than do more detailed numbers. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah,
And then that gets
I think that percent is probably, because each of the metrics is slightly different, I think the percent probably does make more sense. Yeah.
And we
Rachel?
could do percent of progress on each of the housing, commercial, and manufacturing.
Yeah, I would suggest, since we now have the name for the manufacturing area, that we include that. It's the Innovation District. So where it shows manufacturing, put in Innovation District, because that will last for quite a while, and that's where that's going to be. The commercial also, we're looking at basically as part of the town center. There's more commercial than the town center, so I don't know if you want to kind of look at it that way. But the town center during the Planapalooza was cited as something that was important. And, the subtext is, yes, this is commercial, but it's really a center that people were looking for. And then the housing, I think there are several different titles that are being used. So I think that can sit by itself. But we are up to the town center residential area already in terms of the layout and development.
Yeah, my only suggestion is, if you're going to use the word commercial rather than housing, I'd use the word residential, because that's more aligned to sort of how those terms are used in those markets. Or you could do housing, business, and manufacturing alternatively. Yeah, that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I'd say we're trying to convey this as multi-use with zoning terms. So I kind of like the way it is, but aim to hear what other people think.
Yeah, and as a banking guy, I'm just thinking in banking space, so ignore that as needed.
Any other thoughts?
I have a question. And I do fall into the category that you mentioned, Jay, about some of us not having had the chance to review everything completely or even adequately. I was traveling yesterday in the new mode of travel, which is driving. So I'm pedaling as fast as I can. And I have a 35,000 foot view that I'm almost embarrassed to ask, because I feel as though I should know the answer to it. What's the intent of this page? 5 years, 10 years from now, what is it saying? Who's the audience? And is it specific or general? The audience, that is. Does that make any sense? And
Sure.
please.
I'm happy to start, and then others can chime in. So I think the purpose of the state of affairs piece, as well as the demographic, is just to give people a basic grounding in, hey, what does Scarborough look like? What's on the ground? What's already been talked about? And I think the Downs the progress between when the plan first started and now is significant in terms of the impact, I think, on Scarborough. So I think it's just it's a way to acknowledge, hey, here's a major development within town. It's going to potentially have a downtown and be part of the, I guess, a center of commerce and community. So again, I think it's just an acknowledgement of some existing conditions.
Yeah, I guess, Marvin, I would just also add to that, that as we went through the public forums recently, one of the things I remember hearing and we talked about was that, you know, the Downs is sort of it's the thing that's happening in town right now. And any acknowledgement of it in the plan is sort of buried. You know, you really got to look for on page 54 for these, you know, 3 paragraphs, you know, where this is the thing as of, you know, 2020, 2021, this is the thing happening in town. So that was also part of what was intended, you know, in addition to what Karen just said.
And I would just add, Jay, that just certainly anecdotally for me, it's kind of the elephant in the room. People are always asking about it. And I think, you know, there are going to be these sorts of trade-offs in terms of short-term versus long-term readership of this. But I also agree with what Peter said earlier, that this could be a helpful reference point down the road. Sort of look back and see how things actually evolved.
Yeah, and I'd echo that comment, Corey, that when I meet people randomly or have conversations around town, the Downs comes up at least half the time in terms of what they're seeing for change, whether or not you can drive through the development to get from Payne Road to Route 1. You know, it's on the minds of people right now. So I think having this as a call out is important for the community.
Go ahead, Alan.
Just going back to your question, Dave, on other input, I'm fine with the 3 titles as they exist on the page.
But I'm also thinking, well, I'm not, never mind. Hold it.
So I think it was Peter who said maybe we changing housing to residential. Residential probably is more equal or in similar vein as commercial and manufacturing. So you know, if people are okay, I think that's that may make some sense, is to put residential instead of housing.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't end up having to be hyphenated.
Right.
Not to get into nitpicky editing, but I'll leave it at that.
There you go.
I want to add one thing just in terms of the background. And I remember back in the 06 comprehensive plan, this was always asked about as well, with the town and what's going to happen with the Downs. And we came up with the concept that's come to fruition was actually conceived in the 06 plan. If you look back in it, a couple of us actually studied it back then, and it kind of came very close to where we are now. So it goes back in community discussions far before Planapalooza ever came around. So I don't know if it's worth, you know, going further back in time.
Well, I think something like that can be outlined on this page as a sentence describing what was just said. And the other thing is, if you agree to put in the facts and figures from right now, I certainly would add a sentence about why you think you're doing that in relationship to those reading it 7 years hence, so they have some context as to as to why it's included, and particularly in order to avoid having it look dated, if that makes sense. My only other comment about the page in general from the 35,000 foot view, so to speak, is there any, and forgive my bluntness, is there any, I don't know what the word is, sort of subtext to this page having to do with speaking to developers vis-a-vis we like the idea of entertaining these big projects. Please let us know if you're interested in contributing to Scarborough in this way. Is that a part of it? Am I missing that, or am I making that up?
I certainly didn't have that in mind when I was putting this together. So it's important that we know whether or not that's what you're perceiving.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not sure I fully follow. Are you suggesting that we're interested in other large developments like the Downs, or having people come and be part of the Downs and using this sort of as a marketing tool?
I suppose,
or
Jay,
neither of those.
yeah, no, I appreciate the follow-up and letting me know that wasn't as clear as it might have been. No, I'm really looking, the question is, who's the audience? And I think the answer I heard from fellow members is the audience are the people in town. And yet when I look at and I don't mean to digress off of this page, I apologize for doing so, but when I look at the document more as a whole, I'm struck by large sections of it being seemingly, to me at least, geared towards out of town developers, or even further afield people who may be looking for areas for development. And I think this can be read, and my question was, is that an intent? It can be read as this is something we've done, and is it something that we can expand upon? And that's it. Hopefully that's clearer. Make any sense?
In the way I see this,
Go ahead,
is
Paul.
the Downs is somewhat of an affirmation of what we talked about many years ago in the last plan. The Crossroads District, the future development of the center of town, the critical nature of the Scarborough Downs property, and all that sort of stuff. And this is just an interesting discussion or explanation or description, if you will, of what in fact has occurred along those lines. It is a end result of a goal that was articulated in the last plan. I'm not sure where exactly this fits in, but I do think it's worth putting in the new plan, just to indicate that, look, this is what we've done as one of the major objectives keying off the last plan.
Yeah, interestingly, to both Rick and Dave, both your points, one of I think the draft before the final draft had reference to the 2006 comp plan, but Karen and I said, well, wait, so maybe I think as this conversation goes, I can see maybe, and it was right around this point, I think Dave.
It was a sentence before the last one.
Yeah, so back to Dave's point about, just sort of indicating that, hey, what's happening out here is what the town had envisioned. I think Karen probably has that prior draft. It was a short sentence that sort of captured that notion. So we can, if that's the interest of the committee, we can add that sentence back in.
Yep. We put it in, we took it out, we put it in, and we took it out. I think we did it twice.
I think that context would be helpful.
Yeah. I think, and I agree with that approach. And I do think that Marvin makes a good point, and it's sort of a reminder that, and those of us who served on the planning board certainly know this is true, that developers, whether local or from out of town, do read the comp plan, and they will sometimes invoke it when proposing certain things. And so I think it is important to be mindful of that, and not that that's a good or a bad thing. And I do think that we've done that through the course of this, but it's just a good reminder.
Right, and it really is. The plan is intended to document where exactly we think growth can be accommodated, but it's not intended to be promotional. It is intended to be, hey, we've thought about the constraints, we've thought about appropriate land uses, and here's the collective view of the community. But it's not intended to be a promotional item in any way.
I think adding that sentence in will make it feel more like this is the result of the planning and long-range planning and community process, rather than it's
Mhm.
developer who came and put this in place, which I think will change the tone in a way. Because Marvin, it's interesting that you said that. I now that you say it, I've extracted that same sort of feel from this page as well, without really being aware of it. But I think some subtle changes will change the tone
Okay.
really effectively.
Good feedback. Anything else?
Are we satisfied with this section? For today, anyway? All right, let's see if I. All right, want to jump into the next pieces? Some of these are short and again, so yeah, I got a little better at this as time went on, trying to work in PDF. So trying to put comments in PDF. So hopefully you're able to sort of follow that, sort of these insertions or going where the X is, that sentence drops in there. I think my first couple pages don't read quite as neatly as maybe some others, but I'll stop there.
Okay, Jay, that's helpful, because I was going through this last night. Where there's an X, you're adding in that highlighted stuff, or is that where you've taken it out?
That's where I'm adding it in. I tried to use strike throughs where anything's coming out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Folks, keeping in mind what you asked last week, yesterday I sent Jay a document correcting all of the grammar in all of these sections. Grammar, punctuation marks, and a few other things. So that's taken care of. I did my homework.
Rachel, that is awesome. Thank you.
Yep, I did see that, Rachel, and I've got it printed out and we'll be going back through. Yep. So how best can I help with this? Do you, yeah.
Jay, maybe on these short, because these are short inserts, maybe if you can just go back and read the sentence, with the insert as it's supposed to be.
That work for folks? All right, let's see. So the idea here is that, let's see. So this has contributed to vehicular dependence and added cost to providing services, I imagine that should be, and has consequently resulted in traffic congestion on the major thoroughfares. So this is sort of, again, identifying what the issue is. I think that was one of the things we've heard through the forum, that sometimes you read through this stuff and it doesn't make it clear what the issues are. So, and to Rachel's point, we know that as we insert these, we'll be looking at the grammaticals a little more closely. And then this follows, this is not just a transportation issue, but an issue that impacts the municipal budget and quality of life. Any issues?
No comment here.
Okay.
Looks good. Looks good.
Next one. This is adding to one of the callouts to add a sentence that says monitoring the pace of development will help the town understand and manage the impacts to the resources. And I know that was one of the questions, Rachel, you had sent me yesterday in your, a lot of them were, grammatical, but you did have the one sort of question about what does monitoring get us? And I think, obviously, as we all know, the issue of growth management is hot right now. And this was certainly something that council was very interested in. Be sure we captured throughout the document about sort of the pace of growth and monitoring that growth. And in a few places, I sort of reference what the monitoring does for us, but I'll
Yeah,
stop.
I give the comment that I made was that monitoring is kind of passive and assumes you're going to do something with it. So when you say you're going to monitor, I monitor my food intake and do nothing about it and still need to lose weight. So if you talk about monitoring, are you talking about and evaluating? Or are you just monitoring? In which case, at the end of 10 years, you have a lot of data, but have you actually used that data? So as you go along, as I went along, I just thought that is a definition of or a statement about the purpose of monitoring, and at a discussion of at what point the observations rise to the level of action. So I think that I found that bridge, I guess, from a passive monitoring and gathering of data to action to be missing.
And
If monitoring is passive, as a contrary to something more active, is controlling too active?
Yeah, and I guess that's part of, I will say that's part of the balance with the comp plan, because, right, we have the comprehensive plan sort of sets a range of goals, and really, you know, it'll be the reason I used monitoring, intending, Rachel, I think, as you suggested, to evaluate. And then what we need to do as a community at the point in time that we're monitoring and evaluating is make a decision on what is the best pathway forward. And so, you know, I guess I tried to stay away from the word controlling, just because that felt like it, to me, was almost too pointed for a comprehensive plan, where that's really a policy decision that's made after you do the monitoring and evaluating based on sort of the broader goals of the comprehensive plan. But I'm open to others' thoughts on that. I know, Don, I saw you were flagging your hand.
Yeah, if I could just speak, Don, for a minute, I think the goal ultimately of the gathering of data and the evaluation is to be able to provide it to the town council so they can make, and town council can make informed decisions. And at some point, and it may be right here at the beginning, as you're starting to talk about aligning the environment to environment, that may be the place to talk about what the goal of monitoring and evaluation is, what the end product, and the end product is, to my way of thinking, is to provide the town council with the appropriate knowledge so they can make the policy decision.
I'm going to pull up another page. This is the one I was looking for. So this is the sort of statement that's made. Obviously, you can see it, so I won't. Is that sort of along the lines of what you're talking about, Rachel? That sort of saying why we're doing this. And so I guess the question I would have is, do we want that sort of language in all the dozen or so places we mentioned monitoring the pace of growth, or I guess.
Or put it towards the beginning so people know when you say we're going to monitor this, they know what that means and where that process is going.
I would suggest that such a question might be one among several, I suppose, to approach the attorney with, as far as what legal standing this document has, and how the difference between monitoring, controlling, or monitoring and controlling is relevant to that legal status of this document.
And aren't we trying to gather all these implementation steps in the next steps part of the document? I mean, so maybe we mention it once up front, but I kind of it got pretty redundant seeing this over and over again so many times. In my mind.
I'm kind of in that same camp, actually, David. And the other thing is that when we mention monitoring throughout like this, it almost starts to beg the question, what is the metric? What are we monitoring? How are we measuring it? And that probably gets too granular in terms of a level of detail for this document. So I think the concept of monitoring might be called out once or placed within the next steps, but to do it constantly starts to beg a question. And that's a broader concern in terms of the addition of the monitoring language throughout the pages that we're reviewing today. So I'm not sure if that comment resonates with other people, but yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, Peter, that does resonate, because that was sort of, I was thinking, as I was going through this is certainly an area that we heard what I recall hearing loud and clear from the council forum, that they want to see this in sort of embedded throughout the document. And so that's where I was really trying to find a number of places to add that. But then to your point, really calling out just in a few places what that monitoring means, which will get picked up sort of in the implementation piece. So yeah, I think that was sort of the angle I was going for, to sort of thread that needle between it all.
Yeah.
The one comment on this page that I'd say then is that most of the things that would be monitored are extraordinarily qualitative on this page. It's access to outdoor activities. It's the coastal breezes on bedroom windows, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure I can put a meter that measures the comfort level of the ocean breezes. So having a data element for that might be challenging. But clearly we're all going to be monitoring that in a qualitative way. So this might not be the best page to add that, but yeah, it's just an observation.
By the way, I had one other correction on this page, and that was actually the first sentence where it says nature is all around in Scarborough, and nature is all around everywhere, not just in Scarborough. I think it actually, that introductory clause does really nothing. And I would simply start it with, it is essential to preserve and enhance.
Rachel, E.B. White would agree with you. I completely agree.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. This also, if you kind of read the narrative, it talks not only about development but also the uses, and I think throughout this has been raised before, and I'm not sure if this is the time to bring it up, but we talk about the marshes being central to the character of the town and that sort of thing. Well, I mean, we have beaches too. There's no real reference to those. We have a lot of marine resources. We have a working waterfront. So I don't know where that's covered in here, but that's, for me, is a miss. Now, maybe it's because I live in Pine Point, but that is missing here. And I don't know. I think this is one area where it's touched upon, but that's something that was raised at a council level and seemed like it was something we wanted to include. And I'm just, put it in a parking lot. And I just don't think that's adequately covered here. In the last comprehensive plan, I think we had and I'm trying to find the specific reference, but there was a specific reference to maintaining and expanding, use and access to those areas. So I think it's covered fairly well in terms of the marshes and the land trust work that we're doing. But so far as beaches and respective facilities and how to manage use and access, that I think is very light in this product. So I know we're going line by line in editing, so I don't want to get us on a detour, but I did want to just call that out.
Yeah, and I know one of the things we had talked about, Don, and I think will come up in another, the next grouping is there was some discussion, I remember distinctly, about coming out of council, looking at vision. I think it's number 1, if I remember right. It says exactly as you just said, the marsh is the central, and really broadening that language. So I think that's one thing that Karen and I still have on our to-do list.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry to jump ahead, but I thought I'd mention it while it was on my mind, and it's lost forever. So thank you.
And I think the marsh was what came up so many times in the early surveys. So I think that's why it took the forefront. I mean, not that to diminish the others, but community surveys that we were relying on so heavily brought that to the surface.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's certainly central, maybe even primary, but it seemed to have eclipsed the beaches altogether. So at least in what I read. Thanks.
Are we good with this page for now? Hearing nothing, I'm going to move to another page. All right, here we go. So adding the sentence, adding a piece here that says the fourth step is monitoring the impacts of development by reviewing and analyzing, looks like we need to do something there, development trends. The town can manage the pace of growth and impacts of development and prepare appropriate responses to promote sustainable development. Very convoluted sentence. Hopefully the concept is right. And we can, as I said, massage the language, but with the first crack, we want to get the concepts down. So I think this gets a little bit to the point we were just having about to what end.
Yeah, and Jay, I thought this placement was ideal, and I thought it was a nice clarifier. Again, to your point, the sentence maybe can be smithed a bit, but this sentence is impactful and then can almost be incorporated by reference in other sections and reduce the need to keep repeating it over and over again. That was kind of my general thought. But here, I thought this was the right place. Mentioning it as its own fourth step in the toolkit, I like this a lot.
And reviewing and analyzing.
Yep.
Yeah, Jay, all you have to, you've got two sentences there. All you have to do is put a comma after trends. So the sentence reads, by reviewing and analyzing development trends, the town can manage the pace of growth and impacts of development and prepare appropriate responses to promote sustainable development. And you put commas in there because you need commas. You see, the town can manage, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But actually, it works if you have the appropriate punctuation.
Although you do use development 4 times in one paragraph.
As I was reading it, I was like, boy, I just said development a whole lot, didn't I?
On the other hand, you do actually define what monitoring means in this context.
Yep.
Growth is a good word, Jay. Potentially. I mean, as a substitute for one of them.
Yep. So generally satisfied there?
Yep.
Recognizing there'll be some tweaks along the way. All right. 61, let's see. So just adding the sentence, this is just to identify what the issue is, right? We sort of say that this pattern erodes, so we want to just say, what's the issue here in Scarborough? And so that sort of makes it so by just adding the words, however, unabated continuation of this pattern erodes the rural character of the community. And again, read out of context, I could read the whole paragraph, but hopefully that makes sense.
Again, it states the problem, which is, I think, good an enhancement.
Yep.
That's good.
All right.
Jay, I'm still not clear why we have windows brought into this.
Windows.
Yeah, the clear look into the shop. That's
Windows.
on the street level, that works. A lot of construction requirements for places like Maine Med, large commercial buildings, the windows don't open. And I'm not sure what you're trying to convey, whether you're talking about a neighborhood here, when you start to talk about people enjoying the breeze. So it's just a little stretched.
Yeah, I think what our consultants were intending to convey here was more about, downtowns and villages and less about sort of the office areas. But that's not
not
completely
clear.
conveyed, right?
Yeah.
That's an aesthetic thing, I think, more than, just openings to wall. It's kind of an architectural aesthetic.
Yeah, when it comes to the specific commercial area, yes, windows provide customers a chance to look in and impulse shop. Once you get above that first floor, it starts to get a little strange.
I'm
Should we take a
comfortable
look
in
at
terms of
tightening up
design.
that language a little bit? Is that
Yeah,
the,
it could be cut in half, probably.
okay? Looks like 73 is next. So adding at the end of actually inserting, sorry, I didn't highlight the X up here, inserting in the middle of this paragraph, the type, location, and capacity of infrastructure in the community. It's service delivery. Yeah, clearly something didn't quite relate when I converted this. Is critical in order for the town to offer high quality of life to residents. Monitoring infrastructure investments and the pace of development in relation to future growth depicted on the growth and conservation map will be critical to the town, as infrastructure investments have tremendous effects. So again, just looking to insert the notion of pace of growth. And then below, adding a sentence at the end of this second paragraph that growth management tools such as impact fees and growth management ordinance will be important resources for the town when considering these services. And this is, again, I'm sorry, back around sort of the town's facilities and services. And then we get into talking about police and fire and schools and so on.
I think that's a good addition.
So Jay, that's a direct lift from the GMO, right? That language either from, isn't it pretty much talking about the impact fees and the ways we're going to measure growth, manage growth? Where does that?
So the growth management ordinance, it's, no, this language isn't out of the growth management ordinance necessarily, but it's just a recognition that these are the tools that we have to use to help manage, pay for, and facilitate the town services.
Okay.
I'm on board with this. I thought this was fine. Jay, just as a point of order, at 9:10, I'm going to have to vanish for a few minutes to make sure my third grade son logs in appropriately.
Fair
So
enough.
I'll be back.
All right.
Okay, the question I had, and you probably discussed it elsewhere, but some of the stats in here are kind of old. Are there not newer stats than 2016?
I can check with the different departments. We've sent this draft around and asked for comments and haven't received them. I guess.
That may say something.
Yep. I mean, I can certainly do it and be more pointed in the ask if that's necessary. Yeah.
I think that does make sense, actually. Given that it's going to come out in 2021, a 5-year-old stat is, hopefully we can do better. They can do better.
I agree.
Okay. I will send an email over and ask for some updates where they're able to provide. I'm sure they have them. Okay. Which one was that? All right. So still the same section talking about facilities and schools. And this is now trying to get at the issue of pace of growth in schools. So providing high quality schools and facilities is a significant part of the municipal budget, and the town should continue to monitor the pace of residential growth accordingly. What we do about it is future policy decisions to be made, but
my only comment here, Jay, was that maybe in this context, household growth might be better than residential growth, because pure residential growth could include families that don't, or households that don't have family or don't have children that would be part of the school system. But households kind of implies you're looking at families. So just a slight word adjustment, but I thought in this context, it might be better.
Yeah, my thought on that, Peter, is I think sometimes to me, when I hear household growth, it almost sounds like a census definition, like in terms of like household size.
Mhm.
So I wonder if that could cause confusion. I mean, I don't know if others will read it this closely, but
No, and that don't disagree, Corey. So yeah, suggestion, but yeah. I thought the additional sentence was good though, Jay, so it's just a wording choice.
Mhm.
It's a big sentence, and Peter, I probably, it's not disagree with you, but I like the more general approach. It leaves a little latitude and doesn't lock you into something. But either way would be fine, residential or household. But if I
No, Marvin, I appreciate your ear. So if you like residential better, and you and Corey are in agreement on that one, I'll defer. I think that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I don't sound either way. Are these the most current numbers that we have? Or as we know?
Let me see. What did we do for numbers?
We see
No,
2000
these probably, yeah. Sorry, I think these might not be the most
Yep.
coordinated. I think in the work that I'm doing on the demographic section, I was gonna put school enrollment in there, so I think we can do some updating here.
I
The
think we
school,
did-
at the school board meeting last night, they had enrollment, they were going over enrollment numbers.
Yeah.
Because I happened to catch that portion, so they've been working on updating too, so just so you know.
I think though there are some issues with the enrollment numbers this year because of COVID. So this might be an asterisk if we use the 2020, 2021
Yeah.
school year.
And they have that broken out in the numbers. They've got number of homeschooled or whatever. And by how many are doing hybrid and how many are totally online. So just,
Gotcha. Okay.
And Jay, just on the highlighted yellow, though, and when we talk about to monitor the pace of residential growth accordingly, I might add monitor the relationship between residential growth and school enrollment. And that, because that's really, it's not just the fact that we're adding housing. That doesn't tell us what we need to do. It's the relationship between housing growth and enrollment. So it might be worth, I don't know if the committee agrees, it might be clear to talk about that relationship.
and housing types, really. Yeah.
I do think that you want to give yourself as much latitude to move in whatever direction you might want to move. I don't see any point in locking yourself in, honestly. I know that having listened to the workshop with the developers recently, from their point of view, they may like that language, but from the town's point of view, I can't imagine what purpose it serves, honestly.
I guess, Mark, so what I was hearing from Karen's comment, which did resonate with me, was again, sort of back to the idea of what's the purpose of the monitoring. And the purpose of the monitoring, as I heard Karen's, was to understand the impacts on the school enrollment, which is implied in here, but not stated, or at least it's implied in my mind. And so that was sort of what I was hearing is why are we doing this? And I thought those added clarification around that. If that meant something else
Make
to
that
others,
leap.
then we should be interested to understand that further.
Yeah, I think that should be reinforced. I think you're right, Jay.
Well, maybe I misunderstood, Karen, what you were, the point you were making, and I would admit I probably did, but I thought, Jay, that your sentence here says it already. So I didn't think you needed to go any deeper, and it allows you the latitude to interpret it any way you want versus become more specific. That's my only point.
Sure.
I thought it already said it.
Yeah, but I think,
Right, well, it's just it's two sides of the coin. So I was just trying to get both sides of the equation on there. Monitoring growth, monitoring the increase or decrease in units doesn't tell us anything unless it's tied specifically to enrollment and understanding that relationship. And I think, over the last year or so, it's understanding that relationship that has helped look at, what needs to be monitored and how we go about doing it.
yeah, and I don't think it needs to be stated, but we hit the nail on the head when in other studies where it's existing single family homes are what drive up the school enrollment as opposed to multifamily 1 and 2 bedroom senior housing. It does need to be elsewhere, be more specific about the impact.
Sure.
Okay,
Okay, I'm going to move us to another page. Let's see what we're talking about here. Can you read that itty bitty language? All right, so we're in the natural environment section, and it looks like at the end of this paragraph, adding a sentence is about, this is among the reasons it is important for the town to monitor the pace of growth. So just flagging why, again, sort of the why we're doing these things.
Do we need it?
Yeah, I was going to say, I it was obvious to me. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess, my thought was as I read through this, based on the comments we heard at the forums and talking with council, the more places we could just explicitly say it and be sure it's laid right out there, the better. And I thought this was just one of those opportunities for a few words that would help drive the point home.
I agree with you, Jay. I don't think you can say it too many times, although I will defer to our professional writers and their final analysis.
My concern, Jay, was that the previous sentence started with a therefore, which is kind of a concluding statement. So if we say therefore and then we add another point, we kind of it doesn't flow. So if you want to do that, it's say, therefore, Scarborough's unique growth pattern is creating a higher stress on infrastructure and resources that would normally be expected. And monitoring such growth is vital to something, Now I'm into kind of wordsmithing, but the therefore implies it's the end of a sentence, end of a paragraph.
Okay.
Cleaning up the language as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Wait a minute, Jay. I'm back on 84.
Yeah.
I thought the paragraph that started title wetlands are at risk. That whole paragraph is awkward because all of a sudden you're talking about all of New England and the 1800s. You're not addressing wetland impacts in Scarborough. You're just sort of bringing in an interesting factoid that you don't know if it refers to us or not.
Yeah, I think what the author was trying to do here was just indicate what the potential impacts could be to the town, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Rachel's saying there. I mean, I found that general issue with a lot of the writing, in various versions of this, and I know we're making great headway to tighten it up, but where it's not relevant or the data is being used to try to make a point, we ought to use our own data or tie it down to our impact locally rather than telling a story about something in the region.
Yeah, since the 1800s. And the
Yeah.
total number of households is adding to generations of undirected development. Well, granted, back in the early 1800s, there wasn't a lot of directed development, but to the point is what's happening today.
The other thing I'll note is that the footnote for that paragraph references an EPA document, what climate change means for Massachusetts. I think just visually that will potentially offend some readers here in Scarborough, Maine.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to mention later, but this seems like a good time to, coming out of the council workshop, and actually a follow-up workshop that council had with the director of GPCOG, there was reference as how they help communities with comprehensive plans. And based on that, I've been working with the town manager and the executive director at GPCOG, and they are going to once we get through our amendments and we're able to sort of integrate them, we're going to send the plan to GPCOG to try to do that copy editing and to smooth out the language. Because one of the comments we've heard, and I think we've all felt reading this all along, is that, it feels like there's multiple authors. And frankly, there were. If we all remember that when our consultant team came, they said, we're coming with a traffic consultant who's going to write the traffic chapter. We're coming with a climate resiliency expert. They're going to write that piece. A land use expert. They're going to write that piece. So it really, it has had multiple authors, and the piece that our consultants didn't do a great job of, and we've talked about it throughout the years, I think, is really helping to smooth those edges. And so, we're going to, hopefully GPCOG can help us with a lot of that. And this is the type of stuff we're going to ask them to look at as well, because one of the other things we heard is, there's statements made that aren't qualified, using more footnotes when we talk about the benefits of smart growth theories or concepts. We just say them. We don't actually sort of make it, so people can understand that is sort of the prevailing science, if you will. And so that's the work and effort that we're going to ask and have GPCOG do sort of as the plan progresses past sort of our sort of initial cleanup stage. So hopefully some of that stuff will get captured, but certainly jotted the note down about the tidal wetlands chat paragraph here.
And if we delete that, we delete the Massachusetts reference in the footnote. So
Yep. Actually,
kills two birds with one stone.
That reference was from up here, I think, wasn't it?
No,
You're right. You're right.
Yep.
Yep. Well, yeah.
So two birds with one stone.
Two birds,
Delete
one stone. There we
Paragraph.
go. All right. We're good on page 84 for now? Fairly good. All right. Where are we? Page 95. So here, again, trying to get the idea about impact fees and growth management. And this is where we're talking about how the town, so throughout this section, it's sort of where the town's revenues come from or what the budget impacts are. And so adding a paragraph to the existing language about, as you can see, other fees include development impact fees, such as the town's school and traffic impact fees. Impact fees are payments required by local governments of new development for the purpose of providing new or expanded public capital facilities required to serve that development. The town's impact fees require cash payment in advance of completion of development, are based on the calculation derived from the nature and size of the development, and are used to finance improvement offsite of the development. Again, this is sort of the state of affairs section, just identifying what these things are.
Yeah. Jay, did you want to add recreation fees?
We certainly can. Yep.
Jay, my only comment here, I thought it was good to add this. Above, you've got the anticipated 2018 revenue, and we might want to think about whether it's anticipated or actual, because we should have those numbers available. But should we include 2018 revenue, or given that those might have more of a range that varies from year to year, do you want to have a range of expected revenue from the impact fees? But I think you need a number to put it in context versus the other numbers that you've put up.
Yep, I think we can. This is an area we can update the numbers to 2020 numbers, right? We have our current fiscal year. So yep.
And Jay, I was just going to add, this is, I thought the language is a great add, number one. Number two, I think the comments about updating the data is important and relevant, similar to our earlier discussion. The one thing I would just let everybody know, we are going to try to do a better job of drawing the public's attention to how we are viewed some of these things. For example, the impact fees, we did traffic calming in Dunstan. That's had a dramatic impact in improving traffic flow there, particularly in the summer. A similar thing is going to be installed in Oak Hill. So we're going to try to, and maybe it's not for this document, but in general, try to educate the public a little bit better on those things so they know where those impact fees are going and what we're doing to try to address some of the results of the pace of the growth and development.
Good.
Where are we now? Okay, we're getting into the plan framework. We're moving out of the state of affairs and into, as I just said, the plan framework, the growth and conservation map. So this is adding, again, hopefully you were able to follow the bouncing ball, so to speak, intending to add these words right up over here. So it would be, by organizing the town according to conservation and growth areas, intentional and informed decisions can be made about the appropriate location and pace of development and how to most efficiently spend municipal dollars on infrastructure improvements. And then adding a sentence at the end of the paragraph, again, just a qualifying statement that the boundaries are approximate and intended as general guidelines for land use decisions. Again, this that gives the town the flexibility when looking at any updated zoning changes that what's shown in the comp plan is general, and really it boils down to the specific conversations once you dive into those specific neighborhoods and areas. And this is common, this type of language, actually, I think I even found and pinged off the 2006 plan where, it had its sort of said, yep, we're showing you areas, but again, since we're looking at 30,000 feet, we can't know exactly where the hard boundary line should be. That's for future discussions.
Jay, I think that's a good thing to do, but I also think it should be perhaps called out a little better, because otherwise that that caveat is kind of buried at the end. So at least an extra, it becomes its own paragraph. So people actually see it instead of gloss over it. Because otherwise people are going to say, yeah, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what the comp plan says.
We could do one of those blue call out boxes that we do sort of throughout the document. If you think
something like
helps,
that to highlight it.
And if you wanted to integrate it into the paragraph itself, it could go right after the sentence above it. The map is not a zoning map. The boundaries are approximate. And then the final sentence after that being, it is intended to show the desired amount of conservation, etc. It gives it more impact that way, but perhaps putting it out in a blue box is even better still.
So what I just sort of heard is potentially take this whole bit, drop it to its own paragraph or in a call out box. Or do we just want to take this added sentence and make it a call out box?
I think just bring it up to right behind the map sentence.
I would move that sentence is what I would do definitely to after the map is not a zoning map. And I say definitely, obviously, Peter and Rachel have better ideas still, but that's my suggestion.
I think it's whichever way it goes. That's not a concern as long as the people, as long as it's very clear that this is not the new zoning map, that this is approximate for purposes of future planning or future visualization of areas, however you want to do it. So either the way Marvin suggested it or as a separate call out, I think either way works fine. Let's start it as a new, whatever it is, a new paragraph, so people are focused on it.
Okay. We all set here? Staff will continue to noodle that along. 102. Now, this is one of the comments we heard through the forums. I can't remember which one exactly, but just felt a little snooty, or I can't remember exactly how someone framed it, but it's sort of like, well, so we're just taking out the words high quality and just talking about continue to be residential neighborhoods.
You'd be in trouble in real estate advertising if you use that wording with federal law. So anyway, just letting you know.
Yeah, that's a good change.
Yep. All right. Next page, this is where we start to get into the notion of the villages. If you remember, this is certainly one of the main elements that we heard through the most recent public forums. There's actually one of the elements we heard at the previous draft as well. And that's where we made some significant changes back in the state of affairs section on page, 52, 53, 54, right in that range, where we sort of differentiated the different zones. However, we didn't do a good job of capturing that, or at least that's what we heard, and the committee agreed that we didn't do a really good job of capturing that in the conservation and growth map. And so the language here is just intended, one, to make it clear that the village sectors, they're not necessarily growth sectors, right? Higgins Beach is separate from North Scarborough, which is very different than what would be happening at Pine Point and what would be happening at, Black Point Center and what have you. So as you can see, really just striking out a lot of language and adding in, this just a tense item here, and then just adding the words a range of services down here.
I think you addressed the comments. Yeah.
I'd just say that first sentence didn't read particularly well. And as I read it, was the village growth sectors are each unique and have differing degrees of diversity of uses. That phrase, differing degrees of diversity of uses, kind of just felt awkward. Right. I think there's got to be, maybe think about expressing that a little bit differently.
Plus, I got rid of each. I deleted the word each.
Yeah, I think that's a good one too, Rachel. Yep.
Okay. We will continue.
I just don't know what differing degrees of diversity of uses means.
Yep. Yeah, I'm wondering if we need the word differing in there at all.
Or simply have differing. Simply, they all have a diversity of uses.
Right.
Just
yeah. That would
bunch of extra words there.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Good.
Anything else here?
The only thing I'd say is the village centers are predominantly residential neighborhoods that include a limited mix of uses, providing a range of services appropriate to each village or appropriate to each center. Because not every center has the same depth or breadth, but they are appropriate for the character of the village.
Yep, I like that.
And I thought your examples are good. You don't have to name every single one, but you capture the. I capture them, I think, by mentioning North Scarborough and Higgins.
And so, not to put committee on the spot, but I will just mention that we have one member of the public who's here, Allison Bristol, who has really sort of championed this issue, among others as well. And certainly I know we have public comment at the end, but I'm just wondering if, since this has really been one of the issues that she and her neighbors at Higgins Beach have really helped us hone in on, is it worth bringing in now? Or do you want to wait and do sort of your what's typical at committee meetings and wait till public comment. And again, I'm sorry to put the committee on the spot like that, but
I'd be
Now,
fine.
now
I
would
mean,
be appropriate. It seems.
Yeah, I think, yeah, also keep in mind that some of us need to leave at 9:30,
9:15.
so we'll need to wrap things up anyway.
yep. Okay,
If we're on the subject, let's bring her in.
okay, very good. Allison, I see your hand is up and you're coming in to speak. There you go, Allison.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. And also appreciate, having the opportunity to review the materials. One question that I did have on this is that where you've got the text about the conservation and the growth map, you're not showing the growth map itself. So does that remain unchanged, that you've got these kind of areas that are villages with the little dotted lines encircling them
Correct.
on the map
Right.
itself?
Right, that remains unchanged. The only thing that's been provided are those pages that are presumed to be changed.
Okay. And so my question becomes, to see it in a context of the full comprehensive plan. So are we now saying that, because previously all of the villages were growth sectors, if I'm correct. Now I think we're saying none of the villages are growth sectors, and the only growth sectors in town are the Downs, Oak Hill, and Dunstan?
No, I don't know that that's necessarily correct. I think what we're saying, so remember, we still have our corridor transformation area, which is a growth area. We still have our predominantly sort of single family residential areas, which are limited in growth. And the villages really, each village has its own distinct flavor. As has been pointed out quite well through the forums, I think in the fall, Higgins Beach has very little opportunity for growth, right? There's not a whole lot of open area, but it certainly is a village in town where other villages may have more opportunity for growth. I think, when you look at the way Pine Point, at least the sort of gateway to Pine Point, there's opportunity for a transition, what's happening there. I think North Scarborough, again, has opportunity for a transition. So it's really identifying that these are unique areas and they all need to be treated and considered as such when the town goes through and considers any type of land use decisions or any other type of policy decisions.
Okay, well, so again, I haven't really put it in the context of the whole, but what I would respond to that is that we're leaving it very gray. And I think that we're leaving it to, so if the town came up with, or there was some development opportunity that came, up in regards to Higgins Beach, I think just as when we went through the character code revision and what had previously been zoned as residential with commercial use was now being zoned as mixed use, and the coastal mixed use lots were which are basically the Higgins Beach Inn, the Higgins Beach Association Clubhouse, the Breakers, and the Higgins Beach Market, which previously was not in Higgins Beach, their land uses became interchangeable to sort of fit into this mixed use ideal that is, the more modern way to zone things. And when, I think we leave ourselves open to, diving further into, development down here that would go through because it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. You could argue, I did argue that what was being done was spot zoning to make all these uses interchangeable. And the answer was it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I would hope that we would look at the villages and kind of separate out what is ripe for future development in their land uses and what might be left as is, as Prouts Neck has been left as is. Originally in 18, Prouts Neck was shown as a growth area, but then when the plan was revised, it was left as a low to moderate density. And if I can just add, I know there's a time constraint here with on page 105, where we have illustrative planning exercises. To differing degrees, these concepts can be transferred to town villages. And that's exactly my point, that if there are things that are peppered through the comprehensive plan that bless the idea of, mixed use development beyond what the zoning that's been done down here already does, then, I think it's just permission to further develop down here, commercially. So I thank you for your time and consideration. Oh, and also I 100% agree with Councilor Hamel that we need to make the beaches as important as the marshes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know, I think, and maybe I shouldn't have knocked Allison out quite yet. Sorry, Allison. But I think what I heard in that is sort of the complexity of the issue. Because as I recall, when the rezoning of Higgins Beach occurred, as Allison said, there were those who had concerns about the commercial zoning piece, but sort of the prevailing nature that came out and went through council was to articulate some level of commercial zone consistent with what was historically down there. And that's why Higgins Beach, the marketplace, I guess I should say, the inn, one other property, I believe it was, were identified as commercial sort of through that neighborhood review process. And I know that the recreational piece was the commercial piece was talked about quite a bit in that. And so I think that, yeah, I guess I'd be interested to understand how others in the committee feel, because I do think these villages are so diverse, and really the language is trying to capture that.
Jay, I have a
If
question.
you want to get too much more refined, it's almost feeling like it's, we really need to do something holistically different. And I guess I'm not really sure where to go with it at this point.
Jay, I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
As a new member again, and listening to the videos of the workshops, and I'll get the names of the meetings wrong, but in November and December, if my memory serves, I remember the Higgins Beach Association, I think, being represented by the lady who just spoke, and there was a gentleman who I think might have even been a lawyer who sits on their committee, or at least represented them. And the one takeaway I had from that is that Higgins Beach had asked, or the association had asked, to have Higgins Beach removed from the status of being a village. Did I get that correct? And has there been any decision made, if I did get that correct, about the possibility of removing Higgins Beach from this category of village?
Can I address that?
Sure.
It was my understanding and my recollection, and I've certainly had conversations with Allison and others at Higgins Beach. And just so everyone will know, my mother-in-law lives at Higgins Beach. That they aren't asking for it to be removed, so to speak. They were concerned about the growth factor. They didn't want it, their concern is that someone in future could read this comp plan and say, oh yeah, growth. Well, we could do growth at Higgins Beach, and I don't know, we could build a big hotel, or we could build high rises along the beach, or whatever. And those are my words. But that was my takeaway from it. Definitely Higgins, Prouts Neck, North Scarborough. Let's face it, Scarborough is a bunch of Prouts Neck. We're all a bunch of rather diverse little, they were originally village areas within this huge town called Scarborough. So I don't see a problem with actually what we have written right here. Makes sense to me. Because I live in North Scarborough, and North Scarborough is very different than other parts of town for various reasons. So I would hate to see us eliminate that theme of so-called villages from the comp plan.
I have one more follow-up question, and that has to do with, and I'm not in the real estate business at all. And after listening to those two workshops where Higgins Beach expressed their concerns, I thought about it. I scratched my head for a second and thought, okay, there's not much property available, but perhaps somebody put together 4 or 5 different lots and then did proceed to do what you were describing as far as condominiums or hotels. Is there anything in zoning or otherwise in the comprehensive plan, and pardon me for digressing this much, that prevents that from happening? And does any village association with the term village allow that to happen more than not?
Higgins Beach has its own very specific, I'm sorry, Jay, has its own very specific zoning.
Right, and I guess
but go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, what I want to offer, and I think what I appreciate the concern, and I know Allison will correct me if I get it wrong, but what I appreciate the concern to be is not so much what the current zoning allows, it's what might the future hold. And I think that is when we go back to page 53 of the document, when we talk about the character, that's where we, in this draft, really try to differentiate the different villages and sort of added language that, they differ in terms of scale and development and mix of activities, which is important to consider in any planning context. And so I would think that if someone did want to buy up 4, 5, 8 properties, merge them together and build a big hotel, which they can't do currently, that would need to be a zoning change. And as part of that zoning change, the community would take in the context of that's sort of the intent behind the language in the comp plan, is to say, well, maybe that would fit better in, let's say, North Scarborough, but that doesn't fit the village character of these 1/4 acre, if they're even that, they're smaller than that actually, lots in Higgins Beach. And so, no, we're not going to follow, that wouldn't be a zoning change we would promote. But that is the next level of policy discussion that's beyond what the comp plan can contemplate, every sort of variation that might come down the road. So,
and one thing I would add briefly to that is that there's, anyone at any time can seek a zoning change. It's just like anyone can sue anyone. It doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. And as one example of something that didn't go anywhere it's all a blur within the past year, but a few months ago, there was a group came in with a proposal for a contract zone, and we went through the process. The council weighed in, LRPC weighed in, and it was determined that it was not appropriate, and it stopped in its tracks. So I do appreciate the concerns. And I guess the other comment I would make is that, going back to the origins of this document, to me, the village idea was really intended to be more descriptive, and it was intended to highlight those very differences in character and constraints that you're talking about. So I don't see it as something that is, sort of lays the groundwork for any kind of preferential development path or something like that. I do think it makes sense, based on the feedback we got, to eliminate the word growth from this particular village. But, I think at some point we're sort of putting too fine a point on it. And I can understand that people who have real concerns would read this very closely and think about worst case scenarios. But I think, we have a system in place that can process these things.
Folks, I apologize, but I need to leave. We'll see you next week.
So,
Yeah, I think a bunch of
Take
us.
care.
Thanks, Alan.
yeah, this may be
My,
the
my
last point we're able to get through this morning. I think others may need to step off as well, but we'll see how far we get.
it would be great. My last comment about this is if we assuaged Higgins Beach's concern, and it sounds as though we have, and then have the
No.
ability to move on.
I'm not hearing that we have assuaged at least Miss Bristol's concerns.
And
I
think
stand
that-
corrected.
Yeah, I think that sounds like it will be an ongoing discussion with the Higgins Beach folks, which is understandable. I do think, though, the village concept, to Corey's point, it's really a village concept. It's not a village growth concept. It's just a village concept. And that goes for any of the villages that we might be talking about. It's a village management concept. So I think eliminating the word growth is important for setting the right tone. And that makes all of the villages in town really more of an open discussion. And that open discussion is clearly going to take place on an ongoing basis with the Higgins Beach folks. It's already taking place, but you can see it in the same way in Pine Point. You can see it in Pleasant Hill. So I think if we eliminating the growth word is an important differentiator. Just calling them villages, village sectors is the right way to go.
And nothing could happen without an extreme set of circumstances to move, an objectionable proposal forward. So, I think we've addressed it, but we may not be able to make everybody perfectly happy.
Well, and in terms of the long range plan too, we're not going to define the plan for each village in the level of detail
Yep.
in this document. It's just, that's not the nature of this document. So.
I
No
need
one-
to, yeah, well, so anything else I can do before we leave?
So
we
I
continue?
see Allison still has her hand up and she's
Okay.
still in to speak if I'm not. Oh, yeah, I have my one box covering another box. So
All right,
Allison-
can you
Allison-
hear me? I
Yep.
think you have to unmute me.
Nope, you're good.
You're good.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, and truly I appreciate the discussion, but just to clarify, the concern is not about, the what ifs, that somebody's going to buy 4 parcels and build a hotel, because the zoning that's in place would not allow that. The concern is what's been done already, and that we've taken the land uses for the 4 properties that were designated to be coastal mixed use commercial and made them interchangeable. So, this is, so for me personally, and if anybody's ever wondered why I have paid so much attention to all of this is why. Because I have I live next door to the Breakers, and the only thing that's ever been there, if you talk about historical context, has been a private home or a bed and breakfast. And what the Higgins Beach Character Code did was turn it into mixed use that could become an open air restaurant 10 feet away from my bedroom. It can become a ice cream shop and have people parading back and forth from the beach all summer. It can become a lot of things that have never been there. The Higgins Beach Inn is not quite the same because it's a historic landmark. And I would say the same thing with the association. And when they pulled the market into Higgins Beach, it added the retail component that I worked with Jay when they were revising the code. and in 2015 or 17, I guess it was. And long range planning decided that all of this should stay interconnected, and that it wasn't spot zoning, which, I would, arguably say perhaps it is. So, again, not to belabor the point, it's not about what could happen. It's about what already has been done. And so and the character down here, if you talk to anybody who lives at Higgins Beach, has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, even from the, style of houses that are now being built. It's going to look like the Hamptons in 10 years versus the quaint Maine beach area that everybody comes back to for generations. So I would argue that, the conversation is not about what could happen, but what has already happened. And that, again, when changes are in the wind, that the easy way around is to point to the comp plan and say, well, no, this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I think there are a lot of us down here that are really trying to preserve what's here, not have it, morph into something else. And I do thank you for your time.
Yeah.
My question would be what can be done in relationship to the long range planning committee, and particularly the comprehensive plan, to assuage Higgins Beach's concerns about what has already happened, and can anything be done?
I guess I don't see how we can, how a forward-looking plan can address concerns about what's already happened.
No.
Yeah,
And that's why I think the statements that we've got here about villages, it works fine. I mean, this has been an ongoing concern with Higgins Beach forever. And I can say that because I've either lived in Scarborough or lived next door to Scarborough my whole life. So, I mean, it is what it is. I feel that the zoning that we've got down there now will help. Change is inevitable. And the point of having a comprehensive plan is to try to keep change in a direction that makes sense for those who live in these areas. But I mean, Higgins Beach has had a lot of focus on it in the last few years. And personally, I feel that the current zoning that we did at Higgins Beach makes absolute perfect sense for that area. And I know that Ms. Bristol has not been happy just because of the fact that she owns a property that's right next to the breakers, which, I get, but anyway, I just think that what we're doing here in the comp plan addresses whatever.
I also just refer to the title of the plan. It's the comprehensive plan. It's not a neighborhood plan. It's not it's a plan that addresses the entirety of the very, very, to John Marine's earlier point, very, very large square mileage area of the town of Scarborough, with a diversity of village developments, growth focused developments like the Downs and Oak Hill, as well as rural and rural maintenance areas. And we were getting buried into the details of individual plots or individual zoning sections within a specific village is far beyond the scope of a comprehensive plan. So I appreciate the concerns of folks like Ms. Bristol. And what I'd encourage is to look to the planning board and other forums where the specifics of the implementation of the comprehensive plan can be addressed on the ground. But for the nature of this document, I think what we've done here in defining villages as what they are is exactly the right level of granularity to guide 15 to 20 years worth of town-wide development.
Well put. Yeah.
Yes, well put.
Okay.
Jay, I've got
I was just
break
about to
off here.
say, I know people need to break off, so I think we're probably gonna stop here. We can pick up where we didn't get to next week, and hopefully the anticipation is we'll have some more stuff for you. I think I mean, I've got to say, I feel as I'm going through all my notes, my big stack of things we need to look at and integrate in there. I'm checking a lot of boxes. I feel like, another 2 or 3 of these Fridays, just making little bits of headway, we're going to be in a really good spot by the end of this month to be able to bring a revised document forward. So I appreciate you guys bearing with us as we send you stuff, not quite as early as we might generally like to, but we're meeting today and we're meeting next Friday. So there's somewhere in
Jay,
between
just
to get
one-
the work done.
Jay, I'm glad to hear that. Just one kind of scheduling note. The weekend, the Friday after next weekend falls during school vacation week. And just speaking for myself, I will not be available.
And I'm not available because I have a closing. So not kids, but a closing.
Yeah, and Jay, I've got a child, and because we can't travel for COVID and everything, I'll probably be more distracted. So it's not a great day for me either.
So that would be the 19th.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, I will, we'll send something around, see what we can do about managing that date.
But we are meeting on the 12th.
We are meeting next Friday, correct?
Which is fine. Yeah.
And having skipping a Friday sounds good as well. The intensity of what we're doing might benefit, the end result might benefit from taking a break and starting again.
Fair enough.
Take the temperature, Jay. Great.
Yep. And okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
We've had public comment, so
Yeah, let me just check, be sure no one else has hopped on. I shut my, yep. So, yep, we've dealt with public comment.
okay. Motion.
It's very nice working with everyone. Thank you.
Marvin?
Thank you.
Pick it up again next week.
Jay,
All
thanks.
right.
Thank